Welcome once again to the S.E.M podcast. Zack, Hewlett, and Jack Bryce hosting tonight. And our guest today is Matt Fisler. Matt, where are you calling from tonight?
Vineyard, Utah. It might as well be Orem. It's just west of the 15, but pretty much the same city, more or less.
See, and when I was growing up, Vineyard was just the stinky area by Utah Lake. So it's grown quite a bit from what I understand.
Yeah, they just I was just at a city council meeting. They've got plans to put high rises in downtown Vineyard. It's like oh
my gosh,
it's a blowing up place. There's just our ward's pretty much three blocks. I think there's 108 kids under 6. So like if you're mid 30s, this is the spot to be in Utah. Yeah. It's like a zoo. It's crazy, really.
Oh, man, that's awesome. Well, we appreciate you taking time to meet with us this evening. Just a quick reminder of the format of the podcast. So we'll talk about pre-mission and leading up to you going on your mission to Scotland and ultimately your reaction to getting that call. Then we'll jump over the mission and talk about life since you've been home, and then we'll go back to the mission and reminisce. So floor is yours, Matt.
Sure. Yeah, hey, appreciate it. Nobody's ever asked, hey, Matt, tell me some mission stories. That's the last thing my wife or really anybody ever wants to hear. So you're the first person in about a decade plus. Pre-mission, I grew up in San Diego, California, God's country, the greatest place to grow up. I pretty much surfed every day, played football, and played guitar. Chased girls.
So a dream scenario.
Childhood, more or less. No, it was fantastic. I didn't really realize it was kind of unique until I got a little bit older. My dad was always around. He had his own business, so he kind of worked from home. But my mom would more or less carpool us everywhere. But she would just drive us to the beach in the morning and then just pick us up when it got dark. Half the time she'd forget, and that's okay. Bum up 50 cents from some guys in a parking lot and then go find a payphone. But hey, Mom, you forgot us here. But dude, it was great. It was a fantastic childhood. My dad is a convert. My mom kind of came from pioneer heritage, more or less. And so they're always faithful. We grew up, going to church and doing that whole thing. And that was pretty normal for us. Let me think. I went to a place called Scripps Ranch High School, played a lot of football as a quarterback there, but still surfed a ton. We'd have 2-a-days and I'd practice in the morning, go surfing, and then come back and practice in the afternoon. And then I got lucky. There was we had a solid group of like LDS kids in our high school, but they're all like super cool, still great guys. And we started a band together, and it's called Serrated Edge. So hard for us.
Serrated Edge.
Yeah, and then it changed to what was it? Wrong Idea. And then we changed it to Robbie and the Mormons, and Robbie was Mormon, so that made no sense. But honestly, I guess building up, going to my point here, going up to my mission, I am indebted to those guys for everything. They were just so normal and so cool. Like went to church, but weren't like super like over the top with anything. And we just hung out all the time, and it was just like, hey, yeah, we're all going on missions, and like, so there's never like this weird big moment decision of like, am I going? It was just kind of, yeah, like it just, I'm doing what everybody else does. I graduated though when I was 17, so I had a lot of time. So I'm great. My mom, I'm sure, will listen to this. There'll probably be 2 people that listen to this, my mom and my mom.
That's not true. Come on. Don't sell yourself short, Matt.
No, you know what? This is fantastic because I haven't gone through my mission stuff in like a decade. So if anything, I can give this to my kids later down the road and be like, hey,
there you go.
I had some memories. But I remember my mom woke us up to go take the ACT. I didn't even know what it was. I'm like, what is this thing, And she's like, you got to apply to schools. And she was so gung-ho BYU. My dad went to BYU. She went to BYU. All 3 of my older sisters went to BYU. And I wasn't like really sold on it, to be honest. So I applied to San Diego State, UCLA, UCSD, and then all the BYUs. And then my buddy Andrew, who's in the band, went to BYU. And I was like, whatever, man. Yeah, I'll go with you. So I went to BYU, went for a full year. But I graduated at 17, so I went for a full year, and then I was done. I was 18. I'm like, man, I still got a whole nother year. And then so I went to BYU Hawaii, which was so awesome. I lived in Kahuku. If you've ever been there, I lived in Kahuku with this Marshallese family. They hardly spoke English.
Wow.
Yeah, he gave me this little crappy car that had no registration, no license, no nothing. He should just whiz that thing around the North Shore and go surfing all the time. And in his broken English, he's like, if you ever get pulled over, he's like, just abandon the car and jump in the ocean. And I'm like, what? He's like, it'll be cheaper. It'll be cheaper for you, insurance-wise, penalty-wise. He's like, just run it through the ocean. But so that was fun. And then, yeah, I still had another semester. So I call it my second freshman year. And I didn't want to live with a bunch of RMs at BYU. And so I went back into the dorms and just owned that place, you know?
Nice.
Always better your second time. Unique things about BYU. I know everybody's, well, at least people that listen, not everybody went to BYU, but in terms of like pre-mission culture, you have your ward family, and then every Sunday night you have what's called ward prayer. Like your bishop comes into the dorms, and you know your wards are pretty big, and it was just normal. People would just open their mission calls, and you'd have Sundays where it's like, "Hey, we got 15 tonight," you know, and you just roll through those things. And probably the unique part about my buildup going into my mission was I did everything with my sister. She was dating this guy named Johnny, who was in our band in our friend group. And so we used to skate together. We surfed all the time together. We'd snowboard every other day at BYU. We went to BYU Hawaii together. She's 2 years older than I am. And then she decided she's going to go on a mission. I was like, cool, let's put in our papers at the same time. And so we got our calls. They used to come on Wednesdays, right? And you get the big brown envelope. And so we opened it on this Sunday at her apartment. And, you know, I can't remember who opened theirs first. I think it was myself. I think I opened mine first. I'm like, Scotland, like Edinburgh. That's sweet. Where in the world is Scotland? I was like, I can't even name all 50 states. And this will go to Elder Lucas, be like, you're an uncultured, blah, blah, blah. But Lucas, go point out on the map. Go show me where Idaho is. Go point out New Hampshire. Go name the Canadian provinces. He'd be like, how do you not know where? You know, anyways. Then my sister opens her call. She's going to Manchester. I'm like, where's Manchester? And we look at a map. And we're like, would you look at that? They're right next to each other.
That's so
here's
cool.
The weird part of leaving is I went with my sister. It wasn't like this big goodbye. I'm like, she was a cheerleader for 10 years. I played football. Like this, our whole entire lives we followed each other. And so when we went on missions, it was kind of natural, but like,
wow,
natural until we got to the MTC and people would be like, this is some weird married couple. Like, no, that's my sister. You sick up. But, yeah, dude, that was pre-mission, pretty much. Great childhood. I got no complaints. San Diego's fantastic.
So, time frame. You got your call when, and when did you report to the MTC?
Time frame. I got it in. It would have been about late November of 2006.
Okay.
And then I reported in the middle of January 2007. Okay. And then got home New Year's Eve. 2008 got released and was at some New Year's party about 45 minutes later, and it was a shock to the system.
Oh man, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, cool. All right. Well, take us to the New Year's Eve party, and from there, what have you been up to in life since?
Yeah, my buddy Andrew picked me up actually. Yeah, right after the mission. Let's see, my freshman year, I thought high school, and this isn't like hey, I was so fantastic in high school, but like I thought high school was pretty easy. You know, I feel like academically it was okay. I've been in young men's last 7 of the 10 years, and like I get all these young men like, oh, dude, high school sucks. I'm like, dude, you're doing high school so wrong. Like high school was so fantastic. You know what I mean? College was even better. It only gets better. But I'm like, man. But I took that same attitude to BYU and then just got pummeled freshman year. Like grades are terrible. Because I'd be like, oh, dude, I could study for this accounting test and take like 45 minutes. And then I get in there, walk out with an F and be like, I'm joining the Army. I'm doing something. Yeah, it was. So I got back and I'm like, I gotta retake a bunch of classes. Here's the one thing the mission was so fantastic at was I got back and I'm like, I could sit here. And I'll get to this. Nothing is as bad as Glasgow 2008. I'm like, I can sit here for 10 hours in a row in a library, like no problem. And so I started retaking all these classes because I was going to study business, but I didn't have the grades to get in. First lesson in business. I went home. So this was winter semester. And then I went home for some break, and I was talking to my young men's president. I had the best young men's president of all time. I had the keys to his house. He had a soda machine and a popcorn machine in every system, every movie, every game. You bring your girlfriend over there, like the coolest guy of all time. And he's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I got to retake all these classes. I sucked freshman year." He's like, "Well, what are you trying to get into?" I'm like, "Business school." He's like, "Oh, dude, my sister's the dean of admissions. Let me make a call." And you know, I mean, sometimes it's just who you know. So, that being said, I did like ace that year, and I think I would have got it anyways. But so I studied business. I studied marketing, which is so fluffy. If I was to go back, I always tell like kids that I've mentored, I'm like, go study finance or accounting, the language of business, so then you can learn marketing. But I then went. Here's another lesson, and sometimes it's just who you know. I had to get an internship before I graduated. And the top 5 internships in the country were the big 4 accounting firms. And then I think it was McKinsey Consulting. And then Target, which is so random. And I'm like,
Really?
that's kind of interesting. And I was sitting next to this girl at a pool one day, and it's like, hey, she's like, "Oh, I'm from Minneapolis." I'm like, "Do you know anybody that works at Target?" She's like, "Yeah, the CMO's in my ward." I'm like, "Give me that guy's number." Call that guy up. I'm like, "Hey, I'm looking for an internship. This is like really hard to get into." He's like, "Oh, dude, yeah, you're in." I'm like, "Cool." So then I went to Target, and I would manage girls' toys, which is unbelievably difficult. It's like one of the hardest departments to work, because like you could go work in paper towels and picking any product. It's pretty predictable countrywide, but like you sit in this cubicle and then you just work in Excel spreadsheets all day long, and they're like, "Here's a budget, $100 million, go buy toys. You better be right." And you're like, "Dude, I don't know what Monster Inc. doll little girls want to buy in 2008. You know, you're like,
Oh my
that
gosh.
was nutty. And I was sitting there one day, 10,000 people work in that office, and they all have to wear, you know, a tie and a collared shirt or a suit coat, and you don't have to wear a tie. But I'm like, I saw 10,000 people going. I'm like, I can't do this. This place sucks. It's just so corporate-y. It was so corporate-y. I'm like, I don't know if this is it. But I got a job offer there. That was the original plan. And while I was over there, I went on a blind date probably 2 months before I ever went to Target. I was home teaching this girl. She's like, "Hey, there's a new girl in our class. You got to meet her. Go on a blind date." And this is kind of like it's kind of a blind date. I'm like, "Well, send me the pictures. You know, like send me Facebook. Like, let's go check this out." I'm going on a date with her for sure. And so if I backtrack, right before Target, I started dating my wife, and she wasn't very convinced if she liked me or not. We still laugh about this to this day. I told her I loved her probably like 4 dates into this thing. She's like, "You're a freaking psycho." And she'd be like, "That's nice, Matt." And this is probably for like 3 months. Every night I'd be like, "Love you." And she'd be like, "Cool, man." Like, gosh, I'm going to get you tomorrow. Persistence. So I got back from Target, and I'm like, I'm going to marry this girl. And so I got engaged to Rachel. She was out here playing soccer out in Utah. But then, then I was going to graduate. So this would have been December of 2011. Yeah, I was going to graduate. I'm like, I don't think I really want to go to Target. Like, I don't think that's the spot for me. And I needed money to buy a ring. And so I called up this old sales professor I had. And he's like, "Hey, I know a guy who works at this tech company." And I'd interviewed with this tech company. I found their name on Craigslist. I would have been like employee 15. I should have gone. But I'm like, these people are a bunch of knuckleheads. Like, I'm never working at this place. And this guy's like, "Hey, I think this company's going to be okay. I know a guy that manages over there." So I called him up and I was like, "Hey, I need a job. I'll do anything." He's like, "Cool. Yeah. Like, come check it out." It was this company called Qualtrics, and they sold software.
Oh my gosh.
Tiny little company.
Tiny little company. And so his name was Bryce Wilkinson. I'm like, "Bryce, dude, like, I will do anything. Just give me a job." He's like, "Cool. Yeah, no problem." Like, it was recommended by this guy named Sterling Bone, Professor Bone. And he's like, "I trust Bone. Bone's a cool guy. Like, if he recommends you, you're in." And so I started working there that last semester before I was supposed to head out to Target. And I managed to sell something. And I was like, "Great." She's like, my wife's name, you know, and I'm like, this might be better than Target. Qualtrics at the time paid $24,000 a year. Average out of BYU business school was at least 53. If your MBA was like 85. And my wife, yeah, she's like, "Why in the world would you ever consider working for Qualtrics. It wasn't even, and that was before it was salary. It was like $12 an hour. And I'm like, no, I think this might be okay. But I laugh now because when I first got that job, Bryce Winkelman, who's like the godfather of Qualtrics at some point, was like, here's the laptop, just like go try to sell universities. I'm like, I don't know. I don't even know what Qualtrics is, but like, whatever. So anyways, eventually I postponed Target and then called them and was like, hey, this ain't going to work. And then we stayed in Utah. Yeah, and then Qualtrics started doing its thing. But yeah, I think I was there for 10 and a half years. And I managed all of their academic side of the house. So, yeah, I guess people that don't know what Qualtrics is, it's basically the largest data collection research platform in the world. And it just started blowing up. And here's the beauty of like, and this is like, if I've ever mentored any younger guys, I'm like, dude, you got to find a job that is in the middle of like exponential growth, because they have no choice but to promote people who are fully unqualified, which is like my case, where it's like, we need somebody to manage higher education. This is like a $500 million business. And I'm like, I got it. I don't know anything. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, I spent 10 years. It was beautiful. I spent 10 years touring the country, speaking at universities, MIT, Stanford, Harvard, name any Ivy League, telling all these PhDs how they should improve their research and how everything they're doing is incorrect. Wow. Which I laugh, and I'm like, I can't even pass freshman year. It's really incorrect. But no, it was fantastic. And then I got bought by SAP for $8 billion. And then SAP they're terrible. They're a big German company. So terrible. So, not because they're German, but
stop all production. That's what client stands for.
Yeah, dude, they're just so slow. Everything's so slow and so corporate-y. And we were so profitable, and we just got blended into their books. So basically, they're like, "Hey, we need more cash," and they spun us back out public. And then so we actually IPO'd, and then it's so weird. Like I used to go play like football with Ryan Smith when like the thing was small, and now he bought the Jazz and owns everything in Utah. It's just like this weird world. That all being said, so this is like Qualtrics is fun. 5 years into Qualtrics though, so this brings me to what am I currently doing? My wife and I, so we couldn't have kids for forever. We tried, and eventually we had to do IVF, and it worked, thank God. And then, we had 4 kids in 3.5 years. And yeah, it's a little nutty. And then we started, since I studied marketing, my favorite class at BYU, we had this entrepreneurship class. Every week it was just an entrepreneur that just came in, and they all had online businesses. And I'm like, dude, I got to work for these guys. Like, this is fantastic. Because they're like, yeah, I don't really work that much. I'm like, gosh. And I saw my dad run his own business my whole entire life. And I used to always joke around. I'm like, I haven't seen you work in 30 years. But he's like, I'm just clever with how I work. And I'm like, we got to start something. So Rachel and I, we used to come up with a new business idea. We did it for 100 days, which is really difficult. There's like, the rule was, it doesn't matter how stupid it is, write it down on a piece of paper and just come up with a business idea. And so we did this for 100 days. And we had our first little son, his name was Jordy, and we found these little flat-brimmed hats, like surf hats, Ruka, Billabong, Volcom style. And everywhere we went, people were like, that thing is sweet. And we're like, I think that's it. That's our idea. And so we started this company called Binky Bro. And I would work from 7 a.m. So sometimes I go to the gym like 6. So I'd leave at like 5:30 in the morning and get back at like 6 and 6:30. And then we had 4 little kids, and then we would hustle this thing from about 9 p.m. to like 2 a.m. every single night, 7 days a week. And to the point where we had like every night we'd have 8 or 9 people coming in at about 8 p.m. and we'd move all the furniture in our house, and it became a warehouse. And we were cranking out pallets of stuff out of our garage until like 2 a.m. until the neighbors started complaining because we'd have semi trucks come in and pick up all these pallets. And I was doing this while I was working at Qualtrics, and like my boss is my neighbor, and he's just like, "What in the world's going on?" I'm like, "I don't know, man. Like this thing's just kind of got its own. It's kind of becoming a beast." So, anyways, probably 2 years ago now, yeah, I left Qualtrics, and I was like, "Hey, it was a good run. It was fun, but opportunity's bigger now working for my wife." So now when people are like, "What do you do?" I work for the real boss, So we run Binky Bro. It's pretty much. Think of like our end goal, Hurley, Billabong, Ruka. They all started about 4 or 5 years old, 6 years old. And there's this gap between about 6 months to 4 years old where you can't find anything. And so we're fitting that niche, which is really random, but I sell baby hats pretty much. Yeah, that's what I do.
You're selling this so short, Matt. I just looked you up on Instagram, and your page has 353,000 followers.
Yeah, look, we do okay.
Man, good for you.
Yeah, we're in a
That's
warehouse
amazing.
down in Vineyard, and no, dude, I got life's been good. I can't complain. That being said, this is the number one thing though that bothers my wife, and sometimes we've had people say this. They'll be like, "Wow, dude, Binky Pro blew up overnight." And she'd be like, "Yeah, overnight, every night until 2 a.m. for 7 years with 4 children and 2 other full-time jobs. Overnight success." Yeah, it's like nobody sees the grind, but
Of course not.
we've been fortunate. Yeah, it's worked out all right so far. So that's what we do.
Awesome. And how old are your kids?
Jordy just turned 7. We got twins that are 5, and then we got baby Jude, who's 3.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, the cool part with Binky Bro is it's come full circle. Not like you guys really care, but I'll tell you anyways. We just started a foundation. It's called Legends Are Born Every Day to help donate for parents that are going through IVF. Because it's a terrible process. It's honestly such a terrible process. We had 40 grand in the bank when we did it. And we spent 35 on IVF, and we spent the other like 4 or 5 creating Binky Bro. And we were just all in. I remember during the time, like, this is nutty. But I'm like, we got to have a kid. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, so, yeah, we just started that foundation, hopefully give back to the parents that are going through the same thing. Because, like I said, it's not a fun process. And everybody will say, like, oh, you can just always adopt. I'm like, have you gone through that process? That process is going to cost you tens of thousands of dollars. And, you can get rejected. Or depending on what state you live in, you can have a baby and they can take it back. I'm like, that's not like a simple flippant thing you say, but you'd be surprised. And if you say that to a mom who can't have a child,
oh my gosh, you have no idea. It's very true.
Because she's coming after you. Anyways, that's where I'm at the warehouse right now, just because the kids are loud, and so that's what we do.
It's incredible. Well, good for you guys. That's way to hustle, and I'm sure it will pay dividends in the long run. So congrats to that. That's awesome. And I'm sure your 4 little ones are your world, which is really cool. All right, Matt. So take us back now to the mission. You can start MTC if you'd like, but take us back through Scotland where you served, companions, favorite people.
Sure. I've got a cheat sheet. I've come prepared.
Good.
That's a huge cheat sheet. Wow.
I got every companionship and at least one interesting thing from each of them. And I'll start with this. MTC. President Wigglesworth. Is that who you guys had?
No, we're way older than you. Sorry.
My first impression was, well, this guy's saying damn and hell every other word. I'm like, damn hell, there's hell with you. I'm like, this is not the MTC I'd envisioned.
Was he from the UK then?
Oh, he's so British. Just everything you've ever imagined. He's like a character straight out of Austin Powers, like President Wigglesworth. You're like, what is that? What is that name? Wigglesworth.
Yeah.
That alone. But I had 2 companions actually in MTC. We're kind of like this little threesome group. Most memorable thing is this guy named Elder Tadavision. He was my companion. And like my conversion story is like this really slow process. Like I believe in the church from all these like random, small, little, just like, all right, like I think I can see God's hand in my life, usually in retrospect, but I believe and I'm all in. This guy though, his conversion story, he was from Armenia. His mom was like one of the only random members out in this little branch. And he was a sniper out there. This is my companion. And he's out there and he gets sniped. So he gets sniped in the head. And he's like, the last thing I remember, my helmet blows off. Blood is everywhere. He's like, he's in a coma for like weeks. And the branch president goes out and his mom's like, give my son a blessing. Give my son a blessing. Gives this guy a blessing, like snaps out of it or whatever. Comes out of a coma. And he's talking to his mom. He's like, what? Like, what in the world happened? And she's telling him, hey, the branch president gave you a blessing, said you're going to be fine. And then like shortly after he came out of a coma. And so he's like, God joined church. Going on a mission. So then he's like, so what's your conversion story? And I'm like, okay. Nothing like yours, but
not that. Goodness.
No, yeah, the guy was awesome. Yeah, he's from Armenia, which I thought was so random. He went somewhere in England, but MTC was great. it's short. It's only like 2 weeks. You know what I mean? And my sister was there, like I said, so that was kind of fun. And yeah, and then we took the train, obviously, to Scotland. I remember the first person I ever contacted in the mission. And this is where you just know you're thrown in the deep end. It ended up being on the train. I was talking to this guy, and he's a doctor, and he was an abortion doctor. And we got into this big, deep conversation about how terrible he felt about all the things that he was doing. And there's little me who's like, I don't know how this relates, but I think Joe Smith is cool. You know, like, I wish I could go back in time and have all these conversations over again, because it'd be so much more interesting now that I have a little more context in life. But I just remember thinking, oh my gosh, what did I sign up for? You know, I'm like, this is going to be a little more intense. And then at the time, the same with you guys, I would imagine our group was only 5 guys, so it was small. So we went to that little Airbnb type thing.
Yeah.
And but my first thoughts with that was like, what the heck am I eating? What is brown sauce? You guys remember that? Your first experience of brown sauce. I'm like, look, you guys own the entire world. You own the spice trade. You own everything, and all we've got is baked beans, toast, and brown sauce. You know, my word. British people.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so we did that, and then we went to obviously 51 Spylaw Road, and my companion, my trainer was Elder Oliver, Donovan Oliver.
Donovan.
I don't know if he overlapped with you guys, but
he did for me.
He's a Utah boy.
Yep.
And then I went to Inverness.
Oh,
beautiful
wow.
place. Yeah. I feel very blessed in the fact that I got to go there. Here's my first impression of Inverness, and you guys will probably know the name at least. I know Peacock talked about him. And it's like you take the train, and it was the middle of February, so it's exactly what you would imagine. It got dark at like 2:30. It's freezing cold. You get off the train into Hogwarts Land. And you're like, where the heck am I? And Donovan's like, dude, we got to go meet the ward mission leader. I'm like, okay. So Bertie Bubbles. I can't even remember what his last name is, but we should call him Bertie Bubbles.
That's all I knew Bert as is Bertie Bubbles.
Yeah. So my first, this is dark. It's cold. I'm like, where am I? And it just smells kind of terrible out there. You know, who knows what they're making? And we go to Bert's house, and Bert opens the door, and he's got just a robe on and a bottle of wild turkey in his hand. And I'm like, what? And then the guy comes and gives me this big hug, and his robe opens. And he's got nothing going on. And he puts this nasty kiss on my neck, and there's just alcohol just dripping. And he smells so terrible. And I'm literally looking at Donovan. I'm like, he's the ward mission leader? Like, what? Sometimes just, I mean, honestly, though, Bert was fantastic. And as many issues perhaps as Bert had, that guy was at church every single Sunday. And just a fantastic guy. I know a lot of missionaries loved him. We used to go visit him all the time. Sometimes I have to put Bert to bed, you know, but like Bert was fantastic. And my favorite part is he used to leave us these voicemails, and you get these long voicemails. They're just, you mother. And I just remember like, I can't tell my mom that this is our ward mission leader. So like, where did I send my baby to?
I can relate to that because Peacock was my last companion.
Oh gosh!
When we were in Aberdeen, and
Yeah.
Bert used to call us all the time and leave Peacock voicemails. It was so good.
Yeah, that guy he was great. Rest in peace, Bert. But I mean, missionary work wise, this is like right when member missionary work really kind of hit the fan. So I feel like I gave Donovan, I feel like, a hard time for a little while, because I was like greeny fire. I'm ready to go charge this thing. And he's like, hey, we just like go meet members. Like there's no members, you know, like literally our days would be like, hey, we're going to go visit somebody like in Port Mahomet. Well, that's like a 2-hour drive, and that's a 2-hour drive back. And there's only 2 members there. And then you're like, all right, the day's over. You know, like, what am I doing with my life? But
beautiful scenery.
Oh yeah. We used to joke around, grab a camera. We'll hit every castle all the way. I've been like, I don't think missionaries realize this. The Inverness area covered a third of Scotland, and we had unlimited miles. And they were just like, go visit anybody that's a member, has ever been a member or anything. And we'd be up the top of Thurstow. You'd be at the Isle of Skye. You'd be like all over the place. And so, for what it was worth, it was fantastic. Second command, I had Elder. I can't remember his first name. McLean. He's a Joe McLean. Yeah, an Arizona guy.
Yeah.
And we used to go visit, still not really like much missionary work going on, But and that's not because we didn't try. It's just like this. I mean, it's like being in Stornoway. Like, good luck. You know everybody. And we used to visit this lady, and I don't feel bad saying this now because I just looked her up. She's 85 and she lives in LA now. But we cover two branches up there. There's Inverness and there's Invergordon. Invergordon all worked, like you meet in church in this museum, which is kind of cool. But everybody worked for this lady named Ann Perry. And it's like, who is Ann Perry? I don't know if you guys knew her at all, but unbelievably wild, crazy life. So she's a New York Times bestselling author like a dozen times over. She's sold like 26 million copies of her books. She got converted like in the 60s. But there's a Hollywood movie about her because her and her best friend had killed her friend's mom in New Zealand when they were growing up. I only know this because Bert was like, check out this movie. He's like, don't tell Ann that you know. I was like, what? So like, well, I remember spending one P day at Wikipedia Ann Perry for like hours and be like, oh my gosh. Like, but we go hang out with Ann. And it was the weirdest thing because she was like, she talked to you, but it's like listening to a novel. Like, it was not a real person. You know what I mean? Like, she spoke exactly how like you would imagine reading a book. Everything's just like overly descriptive. But she had this huge house. And like her publisher, her editor, her driver, this is all like Invergordon board members. And so we went up there to eat lunch one time, and she had this room that oversat like the North Sea, and it just had crumpled papers everywhere. And she wrote all of her books by hand. And if she didn't like it, she'd crumple it up and throw it. And so you went to this, I mean, she had a massive house. And you'd go up there and sit in this chair. And just crumpled papers everywhere. It was weird. And I still remember to this day, she had this huge picture of the 12 in the Savior. And she's like, this is the only problem with that picture is there's no women. I was like, I don't know how to handle this. But that was Joe McLean. Then he left me and then came back Peacock to die. He was there with me for 6 weeks, and then somebody else, I think, shortly after that. But I mean, that guy's that's like traveling with the walking encyclopedia of Scotland. Like, you bet our PDs were loaded from like 6 a.m. to like 9 p.m. Here's every historical thing that's ever existed in Scotland, and we are going to tour it. And we used to like play this. You drive out in the middle of nowhere, the road would get blocked by sheep. So we just throw the car in park and be like, bet you can't catch a sheep today. We're like, game on, So like this thing fast. And we used to, dude, we had some wild times with that guy. I heard somebody else was talking about this, drinking from Loch Ness. Oh, have I drinking the water from Loch Ness with Peacock? Any elders that came around were like, oh, we gotta go drink the water for the 17th time.
We did that first, just FYI.
Did you? Yeah.
Oh, that was my idea. I was like,
live from Brant. Hey, you're never gonna age. Blah blah blah. It's this big folklore. I'm like, I'm pretty sure I'm drinking some kind of weird algae and I'm gonna die, but whatever.
Yeah, we claim if we live till we're 200 years old, it's because we drank the magic water. So.
Yeah. Honestly, I feel like the best place I ever saw in Scotland, I don't even know how to pronounce it. Elandonan Castle.
Oh yeah,
you ever been there?
I've never made it that far.
The most breathtaking spot of all Scotland, and if anybody ever goes back, that's the one spot to go. But it's in the Highlands, way out towards the Isle of Skye. But you bet I checked that box with Brant. Once again, are we doing a lot of missionary work? We're trying. Actually, no, I did. I gave my first blessing when I was in Inverness. And I don't know if you guys remember. I remember like scared to death. There's a guy named Ben Clark. Julie Williams, the Williams family, was like the greatest member family in Inverness, and her brother was Ben, and I gave him a blessing, which was like a wild thing. And then shortly after, this is like one of my more memorable experiences of Inverness, and there's like the welcome to Scotland moment. He had this buddy whose brother was just like stabbed like viciously, like in Glasgow, which very typical Glasgow, And he's like, I know, you got to give my buddy John a blessing. I'm like, for what? And so we go meet this guy, John, and he's like, everything scary you've ever seen in your entire life. And I'm like, this guy's going to kill us for sure. And he's like, I need a blessing. He's not a member or anything. And he's like, come out to the back shed. So we go around the back shed. I'm like, you go to the shed, it's like a butcher shop, dude. You got like I'm like, this is like Texas Chainsaw Massacre going down right here, right now, I remember seeing this guy. I'm like, what do you want a blessing for? And he's like, that I don't kill this guy. I'm like, don't kill anybody? Like, Wild, dude. That guy was wild. Ben was wild. That guy John was nutty.
Oh my gosh.
And this is like I feel like there's so many reoccurring things where we almost got beat up so many times. I don't know about you guys. Maybe it was just bad luck, but like this is also Brant being Brant to a T. Brant cuts this guy off, I remember, and they slam on their brakes in front of us, and they both get out of their car. And Brant's like, they just want to talk. I'm like, I don't think they want to talk, my guy. He's like, no, they just want to talk. And we're like on Inverness Main Street, and they start pounding on our windows. And he's like, I'm just gonna roll it down. I'm like, no, do not roll down the window, man. I don't know where you're from in Utah, but this is not good. These guys aren't curious. They're not here to say hi, you know.
Jeez.
That guy is not a city slicker. I think he's from Castle Dale. That's where Brant's from. Middle of nowhere, Utah. But anyways, dude, I saw about everything there is to see in Scotland. Visited a lot of members, but like in terms of missionary work, it's tough. Especially if you're up north of Inverness. It's like you go visit somebody, you're like, well, like the next house is 2 miles away. Like, what do you do?
Right.
We didn't have it as bad as I remember. Like Elder Bryce and Elder Marconi would come down from like Stornoway or the Orkney Islands or wherever they were from, and I'm like, oh my gosh. They'd be like, yeah, we know everybody. I'm like, that's tough. Anyway, so I had Oliver, McLean, Peacock. And then I got sent to Alloa with Elder Noble. I can't remember he's a redheaded guy, I think from Idaho. And this is where things started to blow up in the mission, was right about here. And you started hearing all these things. The Stringfellow and all those guys are in Glasgow. And the mission started to crank a little bit. I'm trying to think. This would have been summer. But the year before I got in the mission, there's 119 baptisms. And so, like, you're lucky if you saw a baptism in a year. And then things started to turn on. But we were out in Alloa, and things were still just, like, so slow. And who else is Joseph Jensen? If you guys haven't talked to that guy, I think he's out in Denmark. He's a Danish guy. He was our district leader. He was fantastic. Yeah, so then we were in Alloa, and then I trained Elder Wells. What's his first name? Gosh, Landon Wells. He's from Alpine, Utah. And I've told this story a million times, especially to my youth. I'm like, this is like where I think I had a major paradigm shift, because I started to get frustrated because everybody's baptizing people. And I'm like, I'm 7.5 months into this thing. And like, we haven't even like taught anybody that cares, let alone like invite anybody to get baptized. You know, you get all these meetings like, yeah, well, you know, I'm like, what in the world are we doing wrong? And I remember I was with Elder Wells, and some members had given us this bike, and we ride. This is probably like day 2, and I'm going down Main Street, and my pedal falls off. And you already look like a dork, let's be honest. You know, you got your helmet on, you got your thing wrapped around your ankle, and you're like already feeling like, I'm not that cool. It's just fine, you're a missionary. And then my pedal falls off. And so I'm like, I try to go up the curb and pop my handlebars up, and my handlebars fly out. And so my front tire just hits the curb, and I go flying into the store shop window. And then, I kid you not, this school bus drives past with probably like all like 12-year-olds, which is probably the worst age. It's like, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, this sucks. I get on my bike. I go the wrong way. This is the last part of the story. I get on my bike and I go the wrong way. I get pulled over by a cop in Alloa for riding my bike down the wrong way on a one-way street. And I remember after that, I was with Elder Wells. I'm like, dude, screw this place.
Oh my gosh.
I'm over this. I'm over this. And it was one of those like coming to Jesus moments where I'm like, all right, I'm reading my patriarchal blessing. I'm doing all these things where it's like my patriarchal blessing said it's going to be fun. Your mission is going to be fun. And I remember just thinking, dude, I'm not having any fun. Like, this is not fun. This is not exciting. Like, I look like a goober. I'm not teaching anybody. And that was where like a major paradigm shift in my life, honestly, where it's like, you got to just, I mean, it's like almost like the Gordon B. Hinckley story where it's like his dad writes him that letter, like, just start working. You know, it's like we weren't working. It was just, it's almost like you have a little bit of apprehension, you know, where like, you're almost like, oh, I'm too cool for school type feel. And I feel like it was at that moment where I was like, all right, like, it's not about me. This is game over. Like, let's just start digging in. And then fundamental change. Things started to blow up after Alloa. And I remember the first lady we ever found was a bus stop in Alloa. We were just talking to her kids. And we got her contact information. Her name was Claire Jameson. And then I was so stupid. I've never really gotten that far. Never asked for her address or anything. We had this great conversation. We're like, yeah, we should come teach you. She's like, yeah, that's great. She hops on the bus with her kids. We're like, oh, we're never going to see her again. And this is like so cliche missionary story. We're like, well, everybody has one. Let's pull out the map. We'll pray about it. Why not? You know, everybody else in the world has done this and it's worked. It worked. I'm not even joking. We were like, hey, this area seems good. Let's go there. It was house number 2. I'm with Elder Wells. Some random dude answers, like, any chance you know a girl named Claire Jameson? He's like, yeah, lives right around the corner. And I'm like, no way. So we did, yeah. Claire got baptized. Her son, I think it's Dean, got baptized. I think they had a daughter that got baptized. And that was like the first, like, okay, this isn't all me. God's in the work. You just got to start talking. You know what? That's like, I remember President Fredrick talking about this, where he's like, no diss on President Vriens, but he's like, I don't understand this OYM thing, open your mouth thing. Let's make 10 contacts a day. He's like, why is it 10? It should be every single person you talk to, every single person you walk past, any person that is next to you, always you talk to them. And it was just like, all right, we got to have just that mentality where like, that's just really what it's going to come down to. Is like the grind has to hit hard, which I'm going to talk about hammer time in a second, which everybody seems to kind of dance around. Oh, this is going to be the unedited version of what hammer time was here in a second, because what O'Brien started, I don't think O'Brien realized what he really got going. But so I was in Alloa, started to see a little bit of success. And then I remember, do you guys remember this? Elder Black got he got whacked in the head with a metal rod, and his companion got hit in the face with a golf club. This is in Spring Boyd.
We heard that story.
Yeah, and I remember being in Inverness, being like, "That sounds awesome. I want to be at that place." And I got to, which is so stupid, really so stupid. But I remember thinking, like, that's way more interesting. Like after you've been in the Highlands for so long, I'm like, oh gosh, like anything with people would be interesting. And so I got the call, hey, you're going to Spring Boyd. Oh, which I wrote this report. This is my like economics 405 or something. I wrote a report on the economics of Scotland in the early 2000s. Just because I'm like, what the heck is wrong with Glasgow? It had like the highest mental health issues, the highest drug abuse issues, some of the highest or lowest amounts of education, teenage pregnancies, like everything that negatively affects economics, like Glasgow. And then you mix in, it's the rainiest city in Western Europe. And it's like, you just get this mix of just like, were you guys in Glasgow? I was in Glasgow for a year. And it's a nutty place. That place is nutty.
Hamilton was the closest I got to Glasgow.
All right.
I was 6 months in Cumbernauld. So
yeah, so you know.
Yep.
Yeah, so I mean, Spring Boyd covered like wonderful places like Easter House. You know, you got like, this is like the bad of the bad. And I kid you not, I was with Devin, I think what was his name? Harrison. Devin?
Chad?
No, there's 2 Harrisons.
Oh,
the golfer Harrison. Anyways, there was 3 people murdered within 4 blocks of our apartment in the first 6 weeks I was there with Elder Harrison. And I remember thinking, like, and Elder Harrison had been robbed. Their apartment had been robbed. I'm like, why do missionaries live here? Their apartment had been robbed before we even got there. They stole his camera, all this stuff. And I'm like, we just like drive. It was like normal. Like, oh, somebody got shanked today. Like, what? Dude, yeah. So Spring Boyd, and we also met in a school. Was Bishop Pataranga was like this little Filipino guy, which was like a taste of home. My community back home is all Filipino, and so dude, he was like such a breath of fresh air. You go eat pancit and lumpia, and just such a good guy. The most supportive bishop I had the entire time I was in Scotland, and yeah, we started to see success. We baptized this guy named John, who's like trying to be a Catholic priest for a long time. And he got baptized. There was I can't remember their name. It's going to drive me nuts. Maxine Dewart. I think is her name. But there's 2 ladies, and then they're good friends. I think they were cousins, and then one of their daughters that got baptized 6 months beforehand. And then Elder Harris and I found this lady named Samantha and her daughter Catrice and her cousin Laura. And so they're all about the same age, and they had a daughter too. And so actually, like, it worked out beautifully. And they would come to that little branch, and they all got baptized. Here's a guy you should have on, Roy Peckham. Helped with that a lot. But
really cool.
Yeah, so Spring Boy that place is rough. Rough. But
I was in that ward for 2 weeks after mid transfer move.
Did you ever go visit Sister M? She's like the most well-known person at Spring Boy, probably.
Probably. I mean, again, 2 weeks there. There's no way I was going to remember many people. When you said Bishop Panaringa's name, I know exactly who he is. But
sure.
Beyond that, it was very much the blitz. It was 2 weeks of just, I couldn't recall many people's names.
Sure. So, I mean, our apartment was right next to the Rangers Stadium, and even when like Celtics Rangers played, or like don't go outside. It's everywhere, everybody you saw had Glasgow, smiles, and the Mars bar. And like, I remember this lady we baptized, Samantha, we were talking to this guy outside of her flat, and he's like, he had like the gnarliest cuts across his face, and his whole entire arm was ripped out. He's like, I got a nasty knife fight. And the Samantha lady's like, don't talk to this guy. Like, you could like do murder in Scotland and get out in like 7 to 10 years. It's like something crazy.
Yeah.
It's like,
life sentence is 6 years.
Yeah, you go meet people and be like, I killed this guy. I'm like, what? Well, I feel like in Spring Boy, that was like normal. It's like people are getting murdered all around us. Half the people we talk to have been like stabbed in the face with a bottle. And then like, I'm like, where do you even go in this place? But
jeez.
Anyways, I mean, it was a successful little branch and it was fun. But I could see why Elder Black and stuff got in some trouble over there. Just the place is just rough. But
for sure.
And then this is really the beginning of Hammer Time, and I am not going to skip out of Hammer. You guys missed Hammer Time.
Yes.
The mission went in 2006. There's 119 baptisms. 2 years later, right when I left, it was close to 400, and it just started to see exponential growth.
Right.
And if I was to define Hammer Time, it would be extreme micromanagement. Like that's really what it was. To where it was like, it started with, I know John and Brian started talking about it. It was like, hey, we kind of did raids, the AP used to go into like clean out people's flats, which I remember they did that to us at Inverness and took out like a Simpsons figurine or something. I was like, that's weird. Like the APs didn't even like say hi. They just like went through our stuff and then like left, which is honestly, if you think about it now, like that's really weird. You can do that. But you know, pink ties, they take all that away. But then it turned into like, and I'll talk about this here in a second, but like, yeah, extreme micromanagement to a degree to where it'd be like, all right, it was Coford and Stringfellow or Lucas would show up at your place. Like, what are you doing? Be like in the middle of the day, like lunchtime, be like, hey, your schedule's not good enough. Your planner's not good enough, which is fine. Like we just took it all in stride. But it started to get to the point eventually when I was in Glasgow, by the time I left Glasgow, it started to be like, well, report numbers on Wednesday. So you normally report your joint teaches and members, your new lessons, your new investigators, all that stuff on Sunday nights. Like, well, we're going to start doing it on Wednesdays. Now we're going to start doing it Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Now we're going to start doing it Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And then it's going to be noon. You're going to call and give us an account of the first half of the day. So like this thing got like a little.
Oh my word.
Like really, really, really intense, which is fine.
How did the leaders get anything done if they're taking phone calls all day?
These zone leaders, like I was a zone leader for, I don't know, 16 months, 17 months. It got to the point where, yeah, it's stupid because it's like, I remember being with Lucas and we were up till like 11 o'clock at night taking calls and you're like, man, 6:30 hits you real quick, but we had full areas, and like the APs were like, well, you better baptize. So like, it was like, jeez. I'll come back to this here in a second. We'll come
for sure.
But anyway, so that was kind of the beginning. A little taste of Hammer Time started. Where I was like, all right, like maybe this is why Glasgow is like so much more intense. Peacock and I are chasing sheep and having a jolly old time with Ann writing books, and then you all are like killing it, better or worse. after Elder Harrison, I trained Elder Bear, Tyson Bear, a Utah guy. Guys, fantastic guy. I still have this picture. Bless his heart. You know it's going to be good when we say bless his heart. That means something negative's coming always, you know. But the very first night, we go to visit John, who was a recent convert, who's in the hospital, and there's this guy. Elder Bear's like, I'm going to talk to him. It's outside the hospital, and I'm like, I don't know if he's just never been around this much, but like, which is a good thing. But I'm like, the guy was so beyond plastered, and he's just out there, he's just trying so hard. You know, this is the first day of the mission. I remember I took out my camera out of my backpack and actually took a picture of it. And I'm like, I got to send this to him. Like, they'll appreciate this years down the road. Where I'm like, he's just really just sinking in the first vision. I'm like, this guy's so inebriated. He doesn't even he's going to fall over, you know, like this guy's like, he's real. I think he's coming to church. Yep. Yeah. Did you get a number, Tyson? But we had fun. Yeah, we had he was in Spring Boyd. One of my fond memories of Spring Boyd, the Goldbergs. Did you guys ever meet the Goldbergs? They're pretty famous in Glasgow.
I don't remember them. No.
He was a little wild, but he made me a guitar, which I shipped home. It was beautiful. He made me this red. I don't know, what was it, cedar? I don't know what it was, but yeah, we used to talk about jamming all the time, and he handmade a guitar for me.
Oh my gosh,
Brother Goldberg, if he's still around, God bless that man. He used to hang out with the missionaries all the time, go everywhere. But yeah, then I went to Julian Avenue Ward with Lucas. That guy. Out of all the missionaries, I keep in touch with him the most. Good old Christian. And this is like the epitome of Christian. He came out and visited. His wife is like randomly from Utah, but she's English, I think. Which like makes zero sense to me. But I pick him up in my truck. I have like this lifted Tundra, and he gets out and he's just like, "This is disgusting." I'm like, "Hey, nobody cares about your opinion since 1776, dog. Like, get in the truck." You know what I mean? Like, you're like 5 foot nothing. Like, get out of here. And then, of course, we played tennis because that's what gentlemen do from England. I'm like, anyways. But that guy's fantastic. So Lucas was the godfather, really. O'Brien started Hammer Time. Stringfellow was in there. And then it was Coford. And then it was Lucas who was like, in my opinion, he's just so intense, just an intense guy. And I even had, my sister shipped us these little tie bars that were hammers. And we would just put them on our little tie clip. And I'm like, I don't think anybody ever picked up on that. But like, we just be like, dude, it's Hammer Time. But and going back to the idea of micromanagement, which is kind of like, really, it was crazy. But like, if you think of it like almost like a business, where it's like, just think of like most of the 80-20 principle, 80% do 20% of the work, 20% do 80% of the work. It was really just like the concept of like, can we get the 80% to like, to just be like twice as efficient or 3 times as efficient, And the beauty of Hammer Time though really was like, you could take, let's say elders are 20% efficient. Like all it takes is a pretty strong push to get people to 60 to 70 to 80. But then those incremental percentage points, it's no longer exponential growth. And so eventually Hammer Time had to kind of like die off, just because like you can only beat it for so long before it's like people just don't care anymore. But we would get it from Coford and Stringfellow and we'd pass it on down. But it was just, like I said, it was intense micromanagement, but to the point to where it was like, you go visit elders and it's right. Obviously like you have a district meeting, but like, hey, you guys need a plan. Here's how you're supposed to plan. But it's like a whole different ball game when you're like, no, we're going to go sit in your apartment. We're going to plan with you for the next 6 hours. Because you find all these companionships where it was like, well, we're going to go visit this less active on this side of the town. And then we're going to take a bus. We're going to go visit this less active on this side of the town. Like, this is terrible. And so like all it took was like these little tweaks where it's like, let's take a big map. Dots where everybody that's active, dots to everybody that's inactive, dots on everybody that was investigated, everybody that's an internal investigator. Now let's go hit a little spot, and then you talk to every single living soul as you go, right? And then it's just like I like what John O'Brien said. He's like, I think it was what the mission needed at the time, and I really do believe it's what it needed until people just became just way more efficient. It's one thing to think that you're planning a good day. It's a whole nother thing when it's like you got missionaries next to you, and it's like, hey, well, what's plan A? Then what's plan B? Then what's plan C? Okay, let's do the next 30 minutes. And it's like, now you got these fully extremely productive days. Now there's always that balance of like, well, like, are we too worried about numbers versus people? You know, it's like, that was one thing I feel like we always struggled with. But at the end of the day, President Fredrick's big thing was like, just get people top of the funnel, and then baptisms come out the end. So it's like, even if you got all these joint teachers and they weren't that quality, people are still getting baptized at a much higher rate than they ever were. And I think the beauty of Hammer Time to me was I got so used to just like going down the street and talking to random people like, hey, like, we're missionaries, we're trying to baptize people. Let's just get to the point. You know, or like you go visit like members or, you know, you're teaching somebody and it was like, we fully expect for you to be able to get answers to prayers. And when you get answers to prayers, we expect you to get baptized. Are you in? You'd be like, no. I'm like, okay, like, I don't teach you. And so like, I mean, it's kind of a weird way of doing things maybe, but like, I think Hammer Time, it could be synonymous with just like an extreme amount of urgency was placed on, we're just going to teach people that are ready to do things now. But I will say this, Stringfield, I hope you listen to this. There was like a lot of dissonance between members and missionaries started in Glasgow before I got there, because like a lot of people just didn't see eye to eye on this mentality of like, the person's come to church 3 times, let's just baptize them. And I remember getting into it with stake presidents. I mean, it sounds terrible, but it's the truth, where they're like, you got to stop. I'm like, we're not stopping. Like, and I remember being in this, it was in this stake meeting in Glasgow. And they're telling us to stop baptizing. I'm like, why? They're like, well, we don't have time to like get to meet them. And I remember going through this list. I'm like, do you know this person? I'm like, they've been to church 8 times. Do you know this person? They've been to church 7 times. Do you know this person? They've been 6 times. I'm like, it doesn't matter if they've been 3 times or 10 times. Like, the ward's just not that great at like meeting all these new people. And we don't want to delay them getting baptized for fear of whatever reason. And so there's a little bit of this. I didn't get fed one time in about 9.5 months. And a lot of it started with, I will say the elders before me, but it was like, there's just, there's a little dissonance between like, we got the mentality of, if you're ready, you can answer all the questions in the baptismal interview, we're going to baptize you. But the ward didn't always see it that way, which, except for Bishop Patarenga, who was like, dude, if we don't have baptisms, this branch is gone. So he was like the only one that's like, baptize. And like, that board obviously saw a lot of success. So it's like, it's weird. I had like this weird balance of like, how do you balance between like local leadership and like mission leadership, where mission leadership got so intense and like the wards just weren't quite even close to being there, you know?
Yeah, I think the thought that came to my mind as you're talking about that is that in each of the areas that I served in, the wards tended to be very inclusive with those that had been there for a long time. And then they kind of just, that was kind of their flow, right?
Sure.
And introducing new people into, for lack of a better term, the clique or the family mentality that was already there is hard to integrate new people. And so as a result, you did see some instances where the church didn't grow as quick because people would join the church and then not feel as inclusive as others. Sure. And then kind of just fade away because of the nature of having to go and work to build relationships with people because people weren't trying to build relationships with them. So I can understand where that's coming from.
Like, and I used to, and this is thing that's not terrible, but it's the truth, where it's like, I used to try to really work hard with all those folks there. And then I was in one meeting, it's like a PEC meeting. They're like, you got to stop baptizing foreigners. I'm like, what? And they're like, because they just come and then they go. They come and then they go. They come and they go. It's like an asylum seeker. They come, they leave. And it's like, I'm like, whoa. I don't think that's the way the gospel works, you know? And so it's like, at that point, I remember having this discussion with President Fredrick. I'm like, we're hitting the gas pedal, and I'm not going to be phased, and we're not going to win friends necessarily. But it's like, if these people are ready, and then shortly after that, that's where I had that heated discussion with some leadership there because like they got to come to church more. I'm like, they've been in church like 8, 9, 10 times, but nobody talks to them. So it's like I don't like. Anyways, I'll tell you this. This is out of running 2 businesses, having 4 kids in 3.5 years, and working like 20 hours a day. The most stressful time in my entire life was Glasgow. I started losing hair, and I remember
prove it. Come on, prove it.
I'm bald for sure, but I went with Elder Lucas, and I was like, dude, I'm losing my hair. And I'd like, here's the reality is like, I probably just didn't know how to deal with stress. You know, you're 20 years old, and I'm like trying to be the best missionary I can. I'm trying to overly plan and like make sure the APs are happy and president's happy, and these people hate us. I'm not getting fed anywhere. I'm like, man, I don't know where I fit in this thing. And I remember I was like, I gotta go to a hair specialist, Christian. We go to this hair specialist. He's like, well, he's a very sassy guy, right? It's like, well, good news and bad news. What do you want first? I'm like, good news. And he's like, well, your bald spot is areata alopecia, which means it's caused by stress. And the bad news, though, is you have male pattern baldness, so you're going to go bald anyways. I'm like, oh, gosh.
So you just embraced it. Okay.
Glasgow was, I mean, that's more or less, that was hammer time. You guys missed it. You missed the party. But, man, I wouldn't be surprised if it broke some dudes because it was like, now that I think about it, I called Chad Nielsen. He was at AP way after you guys left. He kind of helped finish off President Fredrick. And I was like, dude, I'm just calling about the mission. He's like, oh, I can feel the anxiety go through my body. And I'm like, yeah, man. It was just like, it was too intense. The reality is like, you took away people's autonomy. It was way more efficient, but like people lost some autonomy, and like it eventually balanced out, which I'll get to here in a second. But Christian, one of my favorite guys. And we saw a decent amount of success, but I have one story since it's Glasgow and we've talked about all these people murdering each other, blah, 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 blah. I know he told this story. Here's my opinion of the story. We got a Finding Faith in Christ DVD call. You know what those things are? You know, it's like Preach My Gospel says, hey, if nobody answers the door, you got to go like chap the neighborhood around or whatever. It's the 18th floor. Or we start off as like the 11th floor. Go give the Finding Faith in Christ DVD. This person doesn't answer. This is in Mary Hill, which is like terribly ghetto. And can I say that word? Is that politically correct? I don't know, but
sure, why not?
We go to the 18th floor, and this kid comes out, and he said, "Why are you knocking on my door?" And like, want to get baptized? I'm like, we're missionaries. We're teaching people about Jesus. Like, this is all we do all day long. He's like, don't you ever knock on my door. And then pins me against the wall, and I'm looking over like Christian, like. And I grew up playing football. I've grown up like, I remember there's this guy 6'4" Marquise picked me up over his head, threw me on the ground, and I was about to get my face beat in by like 10 big dudes. This is in high school, and this guy named Arditas comes and saves my life. Arditas, who names a kid Arditas? So it's like, so this guy's like in the middle of Scotland. He's like 5'5", $110. I'm like, you just want to clip that little badge? I'm like, dude, I'm just gonna like just take you out, you know? But I'm like, okay. And he's just getting all up in my face. Don't you ever? I'm like, this guy's like obviously like not totally here. And I'm like, Christian looking at each other, like, we got to go. We got to go. And we're going down the stairwell. So there's only 6 doors. There's an elevator, 6 doors, 2 emergency stairwells. We go down the stairwell, and the guy's like creeping up, looking at us in the window. And I'm like, dude, Christian, this guy's off. And so we just go to that floor below us. We go 17. We're knocking doors. And then we just hear like, and I'm like, what in the world is that? Door swings open. There's like 6 or 7 guys with knives and shanks. I froze. It's one of those things where I'm like, oh, I'm a tough guy. No, I'm not. No, dude, I completely froze. And I'm like, and it's not that far. It's maybe like, 40 feet in those like little places. And I'm just standing there like, this is where I die. I die in Mary Hill, of all places, on the 17th floor of Creatureville, and I look over like Christian, the door is swinging, and he's gone. And I'm like, oh, crap. And there's no time to get in the elevator. And it's, you got to think of a full story is probably 12 feet, so it's like we just take off, leap, slam into the wall, jump, leap, slam into the wall, jump, leap, slam into the wall. And I can hear these guys literally right back, I got him. And I'm like, like high school, like tracker, like Christian's books are flying all over the place. I'm like, not going to get that. And Christian left out this part of the story. Was first of all, I'm offended now in retrospect that his I'll say his best missionary buddy, he left me to die. That guy left me to die on the 17th story of Mary Hill to get shit. And we later found out, Christian mentioned this too. We were talking to members later, these two girls that were probably like 30 years old. They're like, oh yeah, we know these guys that were bragging about almost killing missionaries. They just killed 2 asylum seekers earlier that February in the same stairwell. But of course, you don't really go to jail, or whatever over there. And they're like, those guys are, dude, you guys are so lucky. But yeah, so we run all the way down to the bottom. Guys pop out of the elevator. I blitz out the back door. Christian goes out the back door. And this is the part where Christian doesn't know this. I caught up to Christian. And I'm like, look, worst case scenario, I'm tripping the guy. If I gotta trip Christian, I'm tripping Christian. I'm willing to sacrifice the little guy. You know what I mean? The world doesn't need another dentist. There's nothing. And we get to our Vauxhall Mariva, and this is like so like overly like Christian too. We get to the Vauxhall Mariva. There's a car parked right behind us. It's like Austin Powers. Like, and Christian's like, and I'm like, drive the damn car, man. Like, we're dying. We are dying right here, right now. And after I yelled that, he finally I think we hit the car behind us, and then we just took off and we laid in our apartment the rest of the day. I'm like, dude, we almost straight up died in Mary Hill. That was terrible.
Oh my gosh.
We mixed that in with like, I'm not getting fed because the elders are like having post-traumatic stress disorder from or syndrome from Stringfellow, and it's at the beginning of Hammer Time. And I'm like, oh my gosh, dude, Glasgow was just like, this is nuts. We did. Christian talked about this too. To this day, the fastest I've ever been in a car is the Mission van with Christian driving. We got to 119 in the Mission.
Gosh. Did he have some sort of like I haven't asked him this, but did he have some sort of like just small man mentality where he enjoyed going fast because he
I'm not going to answer that question for him because he'll kill me. Like the guy, like, well, it's just one of those things where it's like, I mean, did I ever drive the car when we were companions? No, that was Christian's going to drive. I do remember this. If you went down Julian Avenue, our apartment was around the corner, and he used to pull the e-brake just like random times to try to drift. And we're going down Julian Avenue. This is after like a zone conference meeting. Or a little, the Vauxhall Marivas, the bigger ones. We had 4 doors.
Oh yeah.
Pulls the e-brake. We whip. We slam up onto the pavement, onto this grass, up this hill, the whole thing. We look upstairs. There's this big party going on. And I roll down the window, and all these drunk guys are like, "Yeah!" And I stick my heads out the window. I'm like, "Yeah!" I look at Christian. I'm like, "What are you doing, man? Just drive to our apartment." But that is a terrible driver. He's an absolutely terrible driver. There's no need to ever in the mission van of all things. And he told you a story about getting arrested next to Elder Hall and all that stuff for driving. But
jeez.
We baptized though this lady. This is really interesting. She lived out in Oban, of all places, which is like as far west Scotland as you could go. Her name was Wendy. We taught her over the phone.
Oh wow.
Yeah, we got a referral, member referral, and we taught all the lessons over the phone, and then went out to Oban to baptize her. But
it's cool.
This is so random. This is where, I mean, how long have I been going here? 9:14. All right, we still got some time. But you guys are like, no, we don't. We went out to Oban. I had this random lady in my home ward, Sister Ryan Flesh, handed me this note and said, hey, go find these people in Scotland. They're my friends. I was like, whatever. And I didn't think about it until I went to Oban. And we go, and there's a tiny branch. There's only like 3 families there. This lady's getting baptized into this branch. And the main family is the Bartons, and they own a big dance studio out in the middle of no man's land, Scotland. And we pull up to this house, and they own a reindeer farm. And we're like, this is pretty awesome.
Wow.
Big, huge gate, and you drive up there, and then there's a huge, massive Statue of Liberty. I'm like, I like these guys, Like, hey, Christian, look at that, Remember her? Yeah, the French game. And then they got a Dodge Viper in the front yard, 2 Dodge RT10s. That's a Dodge Viper engine in there. But there's no trucks over there.
Nope.
So I'm just like, whoa, like what is going on? They had 2 different Corvettes and just this mansion house. And we used to take their son out, and he's on joint teachers all the time, Josh Barton. But yeah, we baptized a lady out in Oban. And then the other lady that we taught really well, never got her dunked, was Josh Barton's good friend, Amy Asante, which was like, Christian's really smart. I'm kind of just the bro. She went to Yale. Josh is really genius. And they'd write, we'd spend our P days. Christian would be writing like these dissertations and send it to her like in the week and be like, we're going to discuss these topics like on Tuesday. I'm like, this is not in Preach My Gospel. The gospel blesses families. I'm like on principle 1, but needless to say, she didn't get baptized once. I don't think she had any interest once Christian left. After Lucas then went to the office. I got Elder Johnson, Jeremiah Johnson from Huntsville, Utah. Huge guy. Always tan. I was like, how are you so tan? It's Scotland. You should have him on. He's fantastic. So they closed Dunbarton. And we started seeing a lot of success in Dunbarton. And this is one of the cooler experiences I ever had with, I think it was Elder Talbot, Stetson Talbot. He's a brand new missionary. And I was like, we were sitting in the car in Dunbarton. I remember praying, be like, dude, we got to find something good. This is what I tell my young man. I'm like, you got to remember, you're out there for like 760 days. I'm like, I've got like probably like 12, like that was a banger experience. You know what I mean? The rest of the days are pretty tough. But this would be one of those ones where I'm like, we're sitting in the car and I got this distinct impression. You're going across the field. You're going to this little group of homes over there. And whatever. I'm like, hey, Talbot, come with me. And the first door didn't answer. The second door is the lady named Yvonne Towie answers. There's a party going on in her place. And she's like, just come in here. Just come in here. It's just kind of like a weird environment. And we're teaching her the plan of salvation. She's talking about her mom passed away. And I'm drawing this thing up on like the piece of paper. And I'm like, and she's just bawling. And we're all just like crying and bawling. And who knows what's going on in the other room next to us. It's just crazy. She gets baptized. She eventually goes to the temple. We baptized, we were lucky to baptize one of her friends. We found this other lady named Beth Wangari Gachura from Kenya out in Dumbarton. She got baptized while we were out there. So it was, yeah, it's crazy. I mean, you can
you served with Jeremiah in Dumbarton then? Did you move
in
there?
But we covered covered them. We were out there for some weird reason with like exchanges with this elder visiting somebody. And while we were out there, yeah, we found all these people like one day, and then they all ended up being baptized. But
it's incredible.
Yeah. I will say this with Elder Johnson. This is like, I remember one morning, my little tie bar, the hammer, I dropped on the floor and I stepped on it and it broke. And I was like, the time has come. And I remember we were meeting with President Fredrick. I'm like, hammer time's got to stop, man. I'm like, I'm losing my hair. I think I'm going crazy. My tie bar just broke. It's really just a little switch. I'm like, the efficiency of missionaries went up so much that I'm like, it doesn't matter. You can call them 10 times a day. Like, if you plan properly and you've done everything how you're supposed to do it, like, it doesn't matter how hard you push. Like, it's just going to come down to miracles and at that point. But that was kind of the death of hammer time started when I was with Elder Johnson. He then left me, went to the office, and then I had Sean Waite, who is a English elder. I got to be honest, Sean, if he ever listens to this, I don't know if we taught anybody that great. I got really lazy midway through my mission to write in my journal, so I don't got many notes. I do remember that his dad owned a motorcycle Ducati shop down in Spain, which was pretty awesome. But Sean Waite. And then I got transferred then to Aberdeen, Bridge of Dawn, with Chad Nielsen, who you need to have on. So you guys are a little bit older. You started with Vriens, yeah? And then saw a little bit of Fredrick, maybe?
Uh-huh. Yeah, I was...
Jack Bryce.
You came in probably the group or two just after I left.
You got to the mission when I started dating my wife. So,
man, weird, just the juxtaposition of those two things right there, you know? I was just dying in Glasgow, and you're eating cheese and fraternizing with ladies, you know? Yeah, no, it would be really interesting for you guys to have Chad Nielsen on and have a guy named Ryan Blake on, who are basically your APs through probably the end of Fredrick's reign. But they're fantastic. I served with Chad up in Aberdeen. It's crazy. My hair grew back in 2 weeks since I left Glasgow. No joke.
Seriously.
No, I was like, I couldn't believe it. I was taking pictures and sending to my mom, like, dude, my hair's back. I'm like, I just didn't know what real stress was. You know what I mean? I'm like, there was just like a compression chamber there. It was successful, but oh man. If you have nightmares of the mission of going back, it's going, oh my gosh, I woke up and I'm in Glasgow and I'm dreaming. You're like, oh geez, no. I remember, and I don't know if this is a good thing. I remember President Fredrick, we were in this meeting, and he's like, Elder Fisler, I feel like I could pin you against the wall and punch you in the face and it wouldn't do anything. I'm like, that's probably true. And he's like, and that's why you've been in Glasgow for a year. And I'm like, thank you. Thank you with a question mark. I don't know. Is that good? I'm like, I'm losing my mind, dude. Anyway, I went with Chad. Bridget on is awesome. It's great because I go visit Inverness where I had a lot of ties and friends up there. But we found a decent amount of people. I remember we were visiting this lady, and I say though, this is the blessings of Hammer Time. Go knock on this lady's door. She doesn't answer. We're walking down the stairs. She opens the door. She's like, hey, what are you guys doing? I'm like, you want to get baptized? Looking to baptize people today. Want to get baptized? She's like, yep. I'm like, well, that's efficiency at its finest. Her name was Lila. She came to church a bunch of times. Probably the most spiritual progression I ever saw of any investigator was her. And it was literally just from like, you want to do this thing or what? Maybe that's from being jaded, versus being beat down. But we baptized a lady named Lila. We found a couple people in Elgin. Do you guys ever go to Elgin? We found a lady named Avril, who's fantastic, and her daughter Grace. And that little branch was I guess it was a ward, but they're tiny. But they did so great, and they brought them all in. And then here's another random one of those finding moments. I was with this other new missionary in Inverness, and he's like, I'm like, pressure's on. It's my old stomping grounds, And I had the weirdest spiritual, like, we're driving the car, stop the car. I'm like, so weird. And like by that point, I don't know. I struggle with this my entire mission. I struggle with this now as an adult who's been in the church my entire life. It's like, is this me? Is this God? Is this me? Is this God? Am I crazy? Is this the Holy Ghost? And then you gotta get to the point to where, right? If it inviteth and enticeth to do good, it's of God. Okay, is this a good thing? Do I got time? I'm in. You know what I mean? And we stopped this car. I'm like, I don't know. Let's just go knock this door. We knock this door. This lady answers this door. And then her sons ended up getting baptized, Tristan and Saul. I'm like, cool. And that's where it's like, this is where like you have to step back and be like, this is not missionaries. You know what I mean? This is very much God's work. And it really just came down to the principle. If you're just opening your mouth, good things are going to happen. And God's going to put you in the right place at the right time. But it's not you. You know what I mean? It's just like you're at the right place and you're doing what you're supposed to. You're a conduit. And like, I'm a firm believer of that. It could have been anybody. But we had so many experiences like that, especially with Chad when I was up in Bridgetown. We were helping a random lady. Saw this lady moving. Like, dude, we got your stuff. We'll move you in. No problem. She came to church. She got baptized. Her daughter got baptized. It was just like, you're always out looking for like, what can I do? It did get us into trouble a few times. There's this lady below us. She's like, can you guys paint my house? I'm like, okay, sure, whatever. We're like painting her house in the inside. And she's going in the other room. We're like, this is weird. We shouldn't be here in the first place. And she's just coming out drunker and drunker every single time. And then I'm on this ladder and she starts grabbing my leg. And I'm like, Chad, get her off of me. Chad, get her off of me. I'm like, I gotta hit her with my brush. I'm gonna hit her with my brush. Then we like ran out of there. I'm like, oh gosh, like there's enough weird experiences too. But the mentality was very much, dude, you just go all day, every day, so hard. Doesn't matter if you're on the bus, you're talking to everybody. You're on the street, you're talking to everybody. You're talking to everybody. And it was so tiring. But yeah, dude, we're and it became really entertaining. I don't know about you guys. We're like, I got really entertained by like, let's just find like the craziest people we can. Because who's around outside at like 11 o'clock to like 1 o'clock, you know? Not people that have jobs. And Chad and I used to see this guy had this huge trench coat, always walking around Bridge of Dawn. And he's like probably like 6'7", 6'8". I was like, Chad, before we are done, we're getting in this guy's house. Because we'd seen him on the bus a few times. I'm like, dude, that guy's crazy. Like, let's go see. I remember we saw him one day. I'm like, dude, this is it. I'm going after him. And we go after this guy and we start talking about who knows what. I'm like, dude, we got to hang out. Let's just go. Let's go talk. We'll talk about missionary work. We're just interested in who you are. We go to his apartment like the next day. His apartment is 85 degrees and it's in Scotland in the middle of the Highlands. You know, we're like, it's so hot. It is so hot. And he's got a big black beard, long black hair, trench coat. Like this little guy looks like he's from a horror movie. And huge boa constrictors come out from underneath his couch and they're like wrapping around my legs, which is why it was so hot. And we're just like, this guy. I'm like, dude, what is going on right now? And the guy doesn't get baptized or anything. There's no happy ending to the story, but like, we're like, what do you do? And I forget what do you call it? LARPing? You know, LARPing, like live play.
Yeah.
There's this weird group in Scotland in the Highlands that disappears for like 2 months at a time. And they create these little like weird societies where they just LARP and like they do their like weird old school. We're going back to 1400 Scotland. He was like one of those guys, and he's telling us about it. I'm like, this is nuts. You guys are nuts.
And in the meantime, he's got his snakes living in his 90-degree house.
Dude, it was so weird. It was
wow.
Yeah, it was so weird. So weird. But yeah, we saw a lot of success there. I forgot, and this is I'm gonna tell you one last story of Glasgow before I forget. Talking about going to weird places, I think it was Coford found this guy. It might have been Christian. Coford or Christian. There's this guy named Sonny who would show up to church, and he would only let us teach him at the church. I'm like, this is kind of weird, you know? And Sonny shows up. Sonny's been stabbed in the head. And Sonny, dude, like he like bandaged it up and stuff. He's like, I got stabbed in the head. I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, like people try to rob me. I'm like, why do they try to rob you, Sonny? Like, now I'm just thinking like all these different scenarios in my head. I'm like, what? I'm like, why are people trying to rob me? He's like, I always got cash on me. I'm like, why would people know that you have cash on you, Sonny? I'm like, my neighbors, when I grew up in San Diego, were drug dealers. I'm like, okay, let me just put this together. Like, this takes about 2 seconds. And I'm like, well, show me how much cash you got. He pulls out, he had 8,000 pounds in his pockets, which at the exchange rate was 2.6. So like he had like 20 G's in his pockets. And we're like, Sonny. He's like, people just owe me money. You know, I'm like, okay. So this guy's like coming to church all the time. I'm like, oh gosh, this is how we get in trouble with leadership. We're like, who are we bringing? The church is for everybody, including Sonny. But oh my gosh. And this guy used to come. We used to play this game where it's like, guess how much money Sonny has. And I remember he had one time he had 12,500 pounds in his pockets, which is like 26 grand. And this goes to my whole idea of like just trying to find random interesting people, you know. And I remember, I think it was with Christian or I was on exchanges. I'm finding Sonny. I'm like, we always have to teach him at the church building. Like, there's got to be an address somewhere. And I remember I found on the back of this area sheet Sonny's like potential address. And we go there, and this is where I'm like, I should have just called the cops. You know, but like, it's like, you are with missionaries. Like, people just tell you all kinds of weird, crazy stuff. I'm like, you shouldn't be telling me this. I don't know what to do with this information. We go and he's like, yeah, come in. And he's got cot after cot after cot. And I'm like, what is going on here? And I'm like, Sonny, how do you get all your money? He's like, I smuggle people. We take them in these lorries. We can fit a ton in like an 18-wheeler. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, like, what do I even do right now? Like, I'm becoming a slave. He's going to capture me and send me to Eastern Europe, you know, like. Anyway,
oh my gosh.
We had a lot of wild experiences too, like that. Where I'm like, what is even going on right now? But now that I'm older, I'm like, why don't we call the cops? Who knows what's going on? You know, I'm like, gosh, that's what they need, some training for missionaries for stuff like that. Where it's like, if you see stuff like this, X, Y, and Z, call. Because we're like, I guess Sonny's not going to church anymore.
Holy cow.
Anyways, yeah. Bridge Dawn, that was with Chad. That's where I really started playing golf. Still play golf. It's fantastic. And then I went to Dundee with Chad Bockham. That guy almost killed me driving. He told that story. Terrible driver. Also a terrible driver. We worked really, really, really hard, and we were so close to seeing a guy named David Finley get baptized, who was working on his PhD, super bright, super smart, would come to church in a nice white suit and tie. Like, you would have thought this guy's a member his whole entire life. He started this religious group in Glasgow, and they're going to kick him out if he became Mormon. So he wouldn't bite the bullet. But like, that guy for sure felt the Spirit, was spiritually converted, but like just couldn't quite do it. Interesting thing though, like, he was writing his dissertation while we were teaching him, where he's considering topics for his dissertation, and his dissertation was going to be on the difference between Muslims and Mormons, where he's like, Muhammad, he's a young teenager, he sees an angel, he writes a book. Joseph Smith, young teenager, uneducated, sees an angel, writes a book. He's like, man, there's so many similarities, which I thought was fascinating. But we used to have all these pretty intense theological discussions with David Finley, wherever he is. But and then, I went with Bacchum, and then I went back to die in Edinburgh with a guy named Mulford down right in that main ward there in Edinburgh. And we didn't baptize anybody there, but man, we had tons of people coming to church and just couldn't quite get anybody to commit. But Mulford was a great guy, Jake Mulford. He's another Utah guy. We taught these people from Poland, which is really random. But Borjana, what was his name? Borjana and Roman. His name was Roman. And to this day, the worst tasting food I've ever had in my entire life. They made us this Christmas dinner, and there's like this Polish dish where it's like broth jello, and they make it really cold, and then they give you like these like nasty little cold fish that have been pickled fish, and they put it on the stuff. That's the only meal in the entire 2 years where it's like, can't do it, man. Borjana, it's gotta go. It's gotta go, Borjana. Anyway, so then I went to Edinburgh and died off there. Went home on New Year's Eve, and then went straight to stake president. Got released, and then partied on. Dude, the mission is nuts. The more I think about the mission, the more it's like, it's so wild and so crazy and so spiritual and so just like, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm going to die at the same time. Maybe it was the timing. Maybe it was like I was at I had a good year of hammer time, which maybe it was just like, man, this is like crazy. But I will tell you this. People are like, hey, like especially like the youth that I've been with, where I'm like, I've had time to kind of like digest, like, okay, what did I go through? Like, what was that whole experience? What did I gain from this? What did hopefully other people gain from this? And I feel tremendously blessed, though, as much and as crazy as hammer time. Like, going back to hammer time, we're reporting Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and every day in the middle of the day. You're reporting like 14 times a week. But then I went to Qualtrics, and Qualtrics was like, our big thing is transparency. Everybody can see how many calls you make, how many phone or emails you make, how many deals you have in the pipeline. Everybody knows how much you make and all that stuff. And I went there and I was like, oh, game on. And I found the number one sales guy, and I'm like, I'll just copy everything he says. And the number one guy was making 1,000 calls a month. I'm like, dude, nothing's as crazy as Glasgow. I'm like, I'm cranking out 2,100. And it was just, hammer time changed my life, because I feel like I was in such a compression chamber that I realized, like, you can accomplish a lot if you really, 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 really just go after it. You can get a lot done, but it's not sustainable. I'll tell you that, it's not sustainable. But I think for the mission at that time, it was fantastic. Like I said, we went from 119 baptisms to 238 to 370 something to over 400, and it really got to missionaries, like I said, they became a lot more efficient, and they got to the point where like, this isn't working anymore. And then it was just love. Got to change the mentality and have a lot more love. And the crazy part is it took off way more after that. Once you had people that were really dialed in on how to be effective, and now you filled them with a lot of tenderness and love, it was gangbusters. But let me leave you with this. I got a random thought here. It's not a random thought, actually. This is in college, and everybody's got their prophet. My prophet, I would say, is Elder Monson. Like at the end of the day, he's my guy. And we were going down the Provo River, and we saw him drive past. This is me and a bunch of my buddies, and we're like, "It's President Monson. Let's go find him. Go to talk with him. He's got a second house over there, right off the river." And we walked past, and we see him in the backyard, and we waved to him, and then we get to a T. We're like, "Oh crap, he's gonna know that we're stalking him for sure," because there's nowhere to hide. We're like, "Oh gosh," we're like walk down this weird random street that you would never go unless you lived there. And then we got to a T. We're like, "Oh gosh." So right now we're gonna walk back. We're walking past the president, and he's the prophet at the time. He's like, "Hey, you topless boys." He's like, "Get over here." We're like, "What?" And he's like, "Come on, just come over here. Come over here." He's like, "What's up? How are you guys?" He's like, "Story time. You guys do anything?" We're like, "No." He's like, "Come hang out." And so we're there for 2 hours. We're sitting on his back deck, and he's telling us all kinds of wild, crazy stories, which is like so fantastic. And the guy's definitely, I'll just leave it at this. The man is a sailor. I shouldn't say the man because he's the prophet. It sounds kind of weird, but like for sure a sailor. And just, I'm like this. I'm kid you not. I have pictures with my buddies. I'm on the floor rolling over laughing. None of us have shirts on. We're just wearing our board shirts. I'm like, this is the greatest experience of my entire life. I'm like, if you could sit down with anybody and just hang out, not in a church setting, just hang out, it's the coolest. Because not only is it the prophet, but it's in a non-church setting, which makes it to where it's like everybody's just chilling, And it was funny. My best friend Andrew's dad was the state president growing up, and he would never let him have face cards. He's like, "It's gambling. You can't have it in the house." We go inside President Monson's house. Very first thing out there is this card table, and he's playing solitaire or whatever. I take a picture of it. I send it to his dad. Or I send it to him to send to his dad. I'm like, "Oh, dude, you're good. You're playing face cards all day long." President Monson. And he goes and he shows this tackle box. There's a point to my story, which will come here in a second. And we get to this tackle box. He walks us through his whole house, and he's got this one of those, those little singing basses. Yeah. He's pushing it, and he's singing, and he's like literally dancing. And me and my buddy Nick are looking at each other. I'm like, "Are we literally in President Monson's house?" And he's like singing folklore songs and dancing around. I'm like, what is even going on right now? Like, I'm like, my mind is exploding. And then we get to this tackle box, and he's like going through. He's like, "Oh, I caught this fish the guy's the biggest fisherman of all time." He's like, "I caught this and this and this and this with this hook in 1987. I caught this fish in 1992. And we're like, "My word, we're going to go through the whole box." And he can't put it together. And I'm like, "Hey, Tommy." I literally call him Tommy. I'm like, "Tommy, you've been talking about fishing for like 2 hours. You can't even close your tackle box. Like, I don't think anything you've said is true or accurate." And he grabs my finger, and he's got pliers. And he's like, "I'll cut your finger off, boy." My gosh. Yo, we were dying laughing. I have pictures. I'll send you pictures after this. Oh, it's so great. We have pictures. And the only time it ever got spiritual, and this is the point of my story here. The only time it ever got spiritual, my buddy Evan Fox is with us and his sweetheart Camille. And Evan's like, "Hey, first of all, thanks for spending time with us, just hanging out." He's like, "Well, it would be a shame if we didn't ask you at least anything. Like, this is like a once in a lifetime opportunity. It's like, if you could give us any advice in life, what would you give us?" And his advice was, he's like, "Look," he's like, "regardless of whatever you do in life," he's like, "every night, hold your wife's hand and pray out loud and tell God how thankful you are for her so that she can hear that every single day." And he's like, "I absolutely promise you, if you do that, your life will be happy until you die." And then it was like dead quiet like this. And then he's like, "Well, where are your girlfriends?" This is the best part. He's like, "I will buy you guys gum and breath mints. I don't know what you're doing, but you guys need to go hang out with some girls because you're obviously not with girls. And that's the problem." And his bodyguards came in like, "Hey, like Sister Monson's sitting in the car. This is so funny, but people won't like this, but I think it's funny anyways." But he's like, "I've been waiting on her my entire life. Tell her to hold on for a minute." It's fantastic. But to this day, I'm like, man, like I feel like my spirituality, there's ebbs and flows, right, in all things. And I think of like, how did I gain a testimony? It's been through just like small, finding Tristan and Saul, feeling an impression there, finding Yvonne Towie, reading the Book of Mormon when I was a kid, having solid friends who went on missions, and I owe them everything. meeting with President Monson and him being everything more real than I ever expected, and feeling the Spirit while he's testifying. It's like all these small little occurrences over and over and over and over and over and over again. To where I feel like a lot of times, like you go to church and everybody's like, I know this, I know this, I know this. I'm like, if you put a gun to my head, I don't know what I know. But I do know that by living the gospel, my life has been so blessed. And I do know that if I try hard to follow Christ, my life always turns out better. And so I do it. And I'm forever, forever grateful for Scotland. And I feel like it was, for me, probably the hardest time of my entire life and the most stressful and the most rewarding, and taught me the most life lessons out of anything else. And it blessed me exponentially for forever. And so it'll always have a special place in my heart. And it'll always give me a little bit of anxiety. But yeah, man, that was the mission for me. It's fantastic.
Have you been back since then?
I have not. My wife and I were looking at going to Portugal this summer. But it's one of those things where I'm like, man, if we're going to bring the kids out there and go to Portugal, then you get sucked into the Europe travel guide. You know, you're like, well, you might as well go to Spain. If you go to Spain, you might as well go to France. You're in France, and you might as well go across and go to London. And like, so I would love to go back. It would be very, very interesting, I think, to go back as a tourist. Because like being in like the roughest areas of town and having a missionary badge on, it's got to be a completely different experience than like going as just like a normal person. Because like in my mind, I'm like, man, it's rough. But it's probably not. It's just we were just in rough spots all the time, and people don't necessarily treat you that well. And dude, the best thing I ever learned from Peacock, it guaranteed to save my life at least once or twice. That was I told you that story getting stabbed. That wasn't the only time we had major run-ins. And I learned this from Peacock. Clip that old badge, I would throw it in there, and I always had a pair of aviators that I would pull out. CID. Hey, CID. And then people are like, hey. Well, yeah, exactly. Like, oh gosh. How's my Scottish accent? CID. But I haven't been back. It's on the list. I would love to go. I surf a ton. The pro surfing tour actually stopped by when I was in Inverness, and we went up to in Thurso. So it's one of the spots. It's a long life bucket list item. Go check that one off. And so we'll get back there. But you know how it is, traveling 4 little kids. It's work. It's a lot of work. So I don't know. We'll see. But
eventually they'll get older, and then it'll be a little bit easier to travel with 4 teenagers or something like that, you know.
Sure.
So in time, it's not going anywhere.
No. That's the crazy part. You like go to Glasgow and they're like, here's the Glasgow like chapel. And it's next to the oldest house in Glasgow. It was made in 1430 AD. And you're like, oh, nobody's even finding America for like hundreds of years. You know, it's like, man, what a rough place to live. That'd be so cold.
In their stone buildings with no heaters. Oh yeah.
You guys went through all those castles. You go through those things, and like, what's the one? And there's a crazy castle up in Bridgedon. It sits on the mountain there, and it's got all these like weird caves underneath it. You go through there, and you're like, I wish I could just have like a snippet of what was actually going on when people lived here, because guaranteed it wasn't good. But it'd be really interesting to know. Because
are you talking about the one that's like on an island in the sea, basically?
Yeah.
It's like it's south of Aberdeen and north of Montrose, and I can picture it, but I cannot remember what the name of it is. Let me see if I can find it. But yes, I have been there, and it has like the ruins underneath, or like the housing, and then there's upper fields, but it is literally on the edge of the world in the North Sea, basically.
It is. That was the cool part, man, and I feel so blessed when like they started cracking down on miles. But I'm like, man, what an experience it was to be in Inverness with in Invergordon, unlimited miles. I'm like, there's not a castle we didn't see, especially with Peacock. Like, let's go visit some obscure non-member. Hit anything along the way.
I mean, that was, if I'm not mistaken, that was brokered by Peacock. Because he just wanted to be in Inverness.
Oh, he wanted to come back, yeah.
And
Some stuff happened up in Aberdeen, and then he got permission to go pretty much where he wanted.
Yeah, I mean, And for that, I learned a great deal from Peacock. More than anything, it was his willingness to speak his mind. And when he did, that's when he got what he wanted. I mean, you listen to his podcast, his episode with our conversation, and some of the things that he's accomplished was because he followed the Spirit and was willing to be bold. And
Sure.
that unfailing boldness is what I've always admired about him. He's an amazing, amazing man. So I'll figure out what the name of that castle is and I'll text it to you.
Yeah.
I can't find it.
No, Brant was fantastic. And out of anybody, he for sure loves the Scottish people more than any. He probably loves the Scottish people more than Scottish people love the Scottish people.
Oh yeah,
that guy was like a game changer of like, all right, when people talk about, oh, I loved the people, I'm like, Brant Peacock. That's it to a T, 100%.
I mean, it's not anything more than him loving the people. He just felt at home there, and I don't blame him. It's just such a unique experience that we love the people there. We feel like we could be there as long as those people could be, just because we love it. Everyone has different experiences, and I think that's why Brant loves it so much, is he feels like that's home.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. Well, Matt, we really appreciate you making time to come on. Is there any of your favorite memories from President Sister Fredrick that you haven't shared yet that you wanted to touch on?
I just saw him probably 6 months ago.
Oh, really?
And, no, there's no way he knew who I was. Which part of my heart was probably a little bit broken. And I'm like, dude, the guy had so many. You got hundreds of missionaries going through it. Let me see. Hold on. Give me 2 seconds here.
Well, I'll tell you my experience.
There you go. There's me and the man right there. I saw him. What's that roller coaster place up in like Layton or whatever?
Lagoon?
Lagoon. We're at Lagoon with my kids. I'm like, no way, Betty. President Fredrick. Yeah, it's a President Fredrick. And he's just he's just kind of got like that growl.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't matter. It's me, Fisler. What's up? How you doing? You're probably doing great. You got 4,000 grandkids here. Let's take a picture for old time's sake. Click. I'm like, whatever. Like, I love the guy and he's fantastic. He wrote me great letters of recommendation when I was first getting jobs from Wesco Explosives. Like if you want to he's a man to study in terms of like a man of faith and a man of business and a man of how to grow a family. Like everything that guy has ever touched in his entire life has turned to gold. And if you could ever get him one-on-one, just talk about like, how'd you grow Wesco? Like, it's fascinating. Like the man God has blessed him tremendously in his life, but he deserves every single thing that's ever come his way. And he's one of those guys, and I'm for sure everybody feels this way about their mission president. But he's fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. And I'm not surprised that when he was mission president, yeah, of course. What happened? Oh, it blew up. Of course it is. It's President Fredrick. Like, he's never not seen success, but
yeah.
Where did you see him somewhere? Yeah, I think it's funny. I'm like, I kind of look like I'm like Bono's friend from, YouTube with my beanie. I'm like, there's no way this guy knows who I am, but
yeah, I ran into him. Now, granted, I was only in the mission for 6 months before I went home when he and Sister Fredrick were there. But I ran into them in Newport Beach, California. I was with my wife's family and we're getting in the car to go do some activity. And out comes him with all of his family and his wife. And so I hopped out of the back seat of this car. And I said, President Fredrick, how's it going? It's Zack Hewlett. Nice to see you. He goes, just the blankest stare on his face. Nice to see you. And I was like, probably fairly similar experience that you had where he's like, I don't really remember who you are, but it's nice to see you.
You guys talk to him?
No, but I do have Sister Fredrick's phone number, and that's a future episode. So hopefully we can get them on.
As I said, you 100% have to have them on for sure. In terms of people you should have on, you have to have them on. There's no question you got to have them on. Roy Peckham, Jeremiah Johnson, and then those are kind of the older ones that maybe we overlapped a little bit. If you want the rest of President Fredrick's, like I said, reign, right? You want Chad Nielsen, you want Ryan Blake, you want Tyson Bear.
Okay.
Those are your guys.
Well, here's the ask that we have for you, Matt, is if you still have connection with those people when this is published here this week, share it with them, tag them in post, do anything and everything to invite them. Because there's a lot of younger missionaries that are beyond my time and obviously beyond Jack's time where they haven't heard about the podcast yet. And then they get into it and they see some of the familiar names and start to watch the videos and see the faces and they get all fired up about it. I mean, that's why, no fault to Chad Bockham, he got introduced to it, dove into his missionary journals and came on and gave us the whole gambit. And that was awesome because
I love it. I listened to the whole entire thing.
I know, right? It is amazing.
I listen to it when I work out because I'm like, all right, if I recognize the name, I'm like,
yeah, I do the same thing.
Like, I thought John O'Brien's is really interesting because I'm like, what was going on behind the scenes? Because you could feel there's a major shift,
right?
The way that the mission functioned, but it's like as a new missionary, you didn't really understand like all the pieces of like,
oh sure,
but who's McConkie and this John O'Brien guy, and like who, it's like what's happening, it's fascinating to hear them actually talking about. All right, like that makes way more sense.
Oh, I mean, and that's the joy of this, is getting them to share that behind the scenes thought process of everything that went on in front of them, right?
Yeah.
So, but if you can help connect us with people, I know you're a busy man with.
I've talked to all of them except for Tyson Bear. I've talked to all the other ones within the last 6 months. So
good. Well, and it'll give you an excuse to reach out to those you haven't. And just let them know, hey, I was on this, and if you're interested in participating, we'd love to have you. So, but I'm pretty sure, was Sean Waite the last email we got, Jack?
I don't know. Maybe.
Anyway, I'm pretty sure it might have been, but we'll see. But nonetheless, I know Jeremiah Johnson's a future participant. Joe McLean is one as well. Donovan Oliver, you're going to have to light a fire under him because he's been a little bit non-committal for me, but I think he will come on.
Come on, Dad. Where you at?
I love it.
That guy, the first 6 weeks we were together, Donovan, I'm going to throw you under the bus here. So you got to come on to defend yourself. He's like, I'm going to read the whole Old Testament. I'm like, what? Who reads the Old Testament? Even scriptorians don't read the Old Testament. Nobody reads it. That guy'd be like, he'd like sit there and like read it for like, we came in, it's like hours and hours. I'm like, this is good for you. Like I would rather do literally anything else in the world than read this, but.
Oh man.
He's a good guy. Yeah.
All right, Donovan, you got to come on and defend your reasoning for reading the Old Testament instead of making sure Matt was doing what he's supposed to do.
Yeah, exactly. Doing something more fun and exciting, literally anything. All right, guys. Hey, I appreciate it. Hopefully it wasn't too long.
But, it's been awesome. We really, truly have enjoyed every minute of it. We love you. Thank you so much for contributing and being our brother in Scotland. So thanks again, Matt. We'll certainly be in touch very soon.
Sounds good. Hey, appreciate it, guys. Thank you.
All right. Have a good night. Bye.